Welcome, everybody.
Hi, guys.
Thank you for joining us. I'm always delighted to be at South by Southwest Eco. I was one of the opening speakers for the first South by Southwest Eco about 6 years ago, and always thrilled to be back. And before we jump in, we wanted to take a quick moment to introduce ourselves to you all, talk a little bit about our individual backgrounds and context for why we're here, and we're going to try and keep things to about 20 minutes so that we have a good solid 10 minutes or so to have a conversation. Remember, Slido. You can use the Slido app to submit questions throughout this, and we will be using that at the end. And I'll repeat this at the end, but we are also screening the full version of the clips that we're going to show you for nuclear sharks at 4:15 downstairs. And we are also going to be signing copies of my children's book at 5:15 in the exhibition hall. So there you go. So real quick, when most people think of Cousteau, they think of my grandfather, Jacques Cousteau, and they think of a tall, lanky Frenchman with, who invented scuba diving, a filmmaker, a writer, a poet, this legendary environmental pioneer. But personally, I really like to think of him as a problem solver more than anything else. You see, before he wanted to venture into the ocean, my grandfather dreamed of flying in the French naval aviation program. A lot of people don't realize that he joined the French Navy in order to be a pilot, enrolled in the program, and while he was driving on the windy roads of southern France one evening to visit my grandmother while they were still dating, he had a terrible car accident and broke his back. He was ejected from the car, and at first the doctors didn't know if he'd be able to walk again. So his dreams of flying were dashed. He was told to swim in the Mediterranean as a means to rehabilitate his strength. And instead of wallowing in the despair of his bad fortune, he turned a tragedy into an opportunity. And after becoming an avid snorkeler and freediver, he was frustrated. He wanted to spend more time underwater. Now, remember that in the 1940s, late 1930s and 1940s, scuba diving didn't exist. The only way that people explored the oceans really was either what we pulled out in nets or clomping around with big hard helmets, clomping around on the ground with big lead boots. So swimming freely like a fish, filming underwater, all of these things were the stuff of science fiction. Jules Verne. And my grandfather, when he started out, he simply set out to solve that problem. He wanted to spend more time underwater than a single breath hold would allow. He didn't start out trying to save the oceans. He didn't start out trying to be this great environmental advocate. And after tinkering and experimenting, he co-invented the aqualung, or scuba diving, with an engineer named Émile Gagnon. Then, after doing that, there was another problem. He wanted to tell stories in the book, in the diving that he experienced from underwater to people around the world, in films, etc. And so he figured out how to create underwater video cameras. Then he created small submersibles. And my grandfather would fundamentally look at a problem and seek to solve that problem one step at a time. And as a filmmaker, explorer, and environmental advocate, I also think of my work as problem solving. And the reason, as I said, that I am so thrilled always to be here is because South by Southwest Eco fundamentally is about problem solving.
So unlike Philippe, saltwater was not born into my blood. But a sense of curiosity and adventure was. I always loved meeting new people, going to new places, and sharing their stories. And that's when I decided that I wanted to become a journalist. Now, I actually am an entertainment journalist. And I see entertainment as a way of educating, as a way of getting people who maybe wouldn't technically seek out a documentary. Maybe they would watch another type of programming. So that's kind of my way of stealth getting in the environmental message.
Now, I have to tell you, I have had the opportunity to travel around the world, and the abundance of life that we saw in the Marshall Islands was staggering, absolutely spectacular. Every single time we got in the water, we'd be surrounded by up to 100 of these gray reef sharks. And it was really a powerful example of what can happen when people leave nature alone and allow it to recover. Because consider, remember, you saw that image of a nuclear blast. There
23.
were 23 of these nuclear blasts. The largest, Castle Bravo, was 1,000 times stronger than the bomb we dropped in Hiroshima. And it just decimated everything, living thing on, above and beneath the surface of the water. And because of the remoteness of the area, though, there's been very little, if any, human presence since then, and thus also very little research done on the shark population. And as you saw, what we really wanted to find out is how has the population of sharks rebounded in this area when these atolls can be 100 or 200 miles away from the other nearest atoll, and these sharks don't migrate. So we were able to track the sharks and determine that they do indeed migrate, and the way we did that is by tagging 17 of them with satellite tags.
But it's no secret that our oceans are facing huge problems. You guys all know kind of what they're up against, what they're facing. But what we do know is that marine protected areas can work. We know that if we can, and actually we must, try to get 30% of our oceans protected by 2030. And then they will hopefully be safe for future generations. And we've made terrific progress. One of our friends, Enrique Sala, has been saving seas around the world with pristine seas. And the most recent announcement, and I have to read this specifically because it's a long name, of the Northeast Canyons and Seamounts Marine National Monument that was established by President Obama a few weeks ago, that Philippe and I were really active in getting that established for the past couple of years. So we know that these marine protected areas work, but as you just saw, if we can't protect them, if we can't police them, and we can't implement them correctly, then the bad guys are going to come in and steal what belongs to all of us. You know, the Marshall Islands took an incredibly strong, important step by establishing that marine protected area, but it's 4 times the size of California. There's only about 50,000 people that live in the Marshall Islands, so it's ridiculous for us to think that a small island like the Marshall Islands can actually protect that vast area.
And consider today, less than 1% of the oceans are no-take marine protected areas. And oftentimes, even those lack any kind of effective enforcement. Less than 1% of our oceans are protected no-take marine reserves. That's an important distinction, folks. No-take means no fishing allowed. There are other marine protected areas where there's all sorts of activities that are allowed, but truly what's been proven is we need no-take marine reserves. And that being said, it is possible to overcome those shortcomings, the enforcement shortcomings, and that was the title of this, so how innovation can save our seas. Marine protected areas are a critical tool, and there's all sorts of new technology around drones, satellite tracking, and in some cases, a very low-tech method, like the Philippines and Indonesia and other countries are now enforcing, where when they find illegal fishing boats, they don't fine them and let them go on their way or turn the other cheek. They're being very aggressive. They just blow them up on the spot. Take the people off first, of course.
Yeah.
Then just blow them up.
That's a good point to make.
So that's
just the boat is blown up.
Just the boat is putting a dent in some of those activities.
Yep.
And you know, fundamentally, I think while challenges exist, and we're coming up on our 10 minutes here, but while challenges exist, we wanted to be brief so we could have a conversation with you all. What we really wanted to leave you with today is that there is hope and there are opportunities. And marine protected areas, those kinds of tools are really critical in our toolkit to protect the oceans. Because climate change, ocean acidification, these are very big, global, anthropogenic, long-term problems that are going to take a lot of work to solve. But there are things like overfishing that we can solve now. And marine protected areas is a critical tool in that effort. We know how to do it. We know how to establish these marine protected areas. And in many cases, we're building the kind of enforcement and tools. I mean, that's where it comes in to you all. As Ashlan said, President Obama established the Northeast Seamounts and Monument, Seamount and Canyons Monument.
Canyons.
Oh my God, it's so long.
Marine National Monument.
Marine National Monument, just off of the North Atlantic. It is the first marine protected area established by the United States in federal Atlantic waters. It is over 2,000 square miles. It is a no-take zone, and it was a long, multi-year battle because there are strong fishing interests in New England that don't believe that anything should be set aside for the rest of us, that they have sovereignty over everything. And we're not saying people shouldn't be able to fish. People shouldn't be able to make a livelihood. We're just saying that there need to be areas that give respite to the ocean to allow it to recover, as the Marshall Islands did, even after being completely decimated by 23 nuclear bombs. And so this is where you come in, and it's incumbent upon you as voters to be thinking about these issues, not only just supporting marine protected areas and supporting ocean conservation, but supporting the organizations, the NGOs that are doing that work, supporting federal legislation around funding NOAA. At South by Southwest last year, I was on a panel for Oceans versus Space. NASA's budget is several billion dollars. NOAA's budget for ocean exploration is 23 million. So we have some real mislaid priorities, in my opinion. And as the public and as voters, we need to be standing up and saying we need to protect our oceans, and we need to enable and utilize these types of tools to do it. So that was kind of our mission, because Ashlan and I really believe, and we have hope for our oceans, and we have hope for the future if we stand up together as a community of citizens to do something and implement the solutions we know exist.
And save our sharks.
Save the sharks. God, do we love sharks. It's the best. So there you go. You can follow us also, very easy, on all of those platforms. Ashlan Cousteau, P. Cousteau for social media. We're always posting stuff and information and things about the different adventures we go on. But I think we have about 10 minutes, 8 minutes, 9 minutes, something like that. So 11 minutes. Outstanding. We are like 1 minute over, man. Woo. I'm excited. I'm proud of myself.
Okay, so our first question is from Timmy. There we go. Do species in the Marshalls bioaccumulate radioactive material like terrestrials in Chernobyl? And if so, does this seem to impact their health and other species? So what I found super interesting, because when I first told my parents, who live in North Carolina, well, A, that I was marrying a Cousteau, they were like, oh my God. Two, that I was going to the Marshall Islands and it's radioactive, their minds like literally almost exploded. So I found that it was fascinating to know that the actual water around the Marshall Islands, even though it was heated to the surface of the sun during these, it was actually as hot as the surface of the sun when those nuclear blasts went off. After even just a few days, a few weeks, the water was completely clear. Because as you can think of all of the tides, all of the currents, and how massive our oceans are, it actually moved the radioactivity, dispersed it pretty quickly. The land, not so much. So we actually couldn't spend more than about 30 minutes on land, especially on Bikini and Rongelap. You can't eat anything that's still on the island because there is still cesium all the way, from the topsoil all the way down to about 6 inches to a foot. It's still technically all radioactive. It'll probably be radioactive forever. So you couldn't eat anything on the islands. There are caretakers that live on the islands, but they have to get all of their six men. But they have to get all their food brought in. Couldn't eat the hermit crabs, couldn't eat the coconut crabs, and nothing. So yes, there are species still that are still seeing radioactivity, but honestly, most
on the land. So the hermit crabs, things like that, still have radioactivity in them, but anything in the ocean is clear because it's been dispersed over 70 years. And as Ashlan said, happened relatively quickly, although we don't know 100% exactly how quickly, but it is clear to dive. You can do all that you want, but when we got onto land, we definitely didn't want to spend too much time, especially around those ruined bunkers, etc.
Here, I picked one, you pick one.
Yeah. Let's see here.
It's a marriage, we have to share.
Do you all choose not to eat seafood? That's an easy one. Yes, I do not eat seafood. Never have liked seafood, actually. Don't eat a lot of meat either. Very rarely do we eat any meat. Seafood for me is not an ethical choice. It's the smell and taste just always grossed me out. Easy as that ever since I was little.
I think it's because they're your friends.
They are. They're my friends, and who wants to eat your friends? Ashlan is one who
I still eat a little seafood.
Eats a little bit, but a lot less than what we meant.
I am very
a lot less
picky
tuna,
now.
Particularly.
Yeah.
But that was an easy one. So another question, how do we support marine protected areas? And I'll pass it on to you because I know there's the one on the bottom about an aspiring journalist. How do we establish and enforce marine protected areas? We need to be sending messages to our elected officials, and I'm not just talking about if we live along the coast, folks. I'm talking about landlocked places as well, that we want to invest in ocean conservation as a nation, as states, and as a people, that this is important. I am always saddened by the headlines, particularly recently, about going to Mars. Let's go to Mars. Let's do all this shenanigans and spend all this money and go to Mars. Like, forgive me, but that's the most asinine thing I've ever heard in my entire life. Going and finding out whether there was ever water on Mars and having people spend billions upon billions of dollars to try and live on Mars is ridiculous. Water on Mars means nothing to us on this planet, right? It's not like we're all gonna like move to Mars in 100 years when this planet's toast. This is stupidity. And to think that we invest over $4 billion a year in NASA in space exploration, not saying that space is invaluable, and 23 million into ocean exploration by NOAA, our federal ocean and atmospheric agency, is unbelievable to me. Is a case of misplaced priorities of the worst kind. Again, knowing if there was water on Mars is not critical to life on this planet. Healthy oceans are very critical to all life on this planet, no matter where we live. And so, sending that message to our elected officials is really, really important. And our friends and our peers, and spreading the message and being advocates for the ocean is critical. And we need to do it every single day and elevate this issue in the world and know that there are solutions. I think that's really what we wanted to come across this talk, that there are solutions to these problems. Because when we feel like there's too much doom and gloom and there's nothing we can do about it all, like, who wants to be involved in that, right? It turns everybody off. And so really for us, what we loved about this show is that we can demonstrate, wow, after the worst fire and brimstone humanity can launch at a place, nature rebounded, it recovered in a spectacular way, beautifully. And that is such a hopeful message for me. Now we've got shenanigans around the fishing, but we can solve that problem too. And nature has an incredible ability to rebound. And so we just have to give it the chance. And that's a hopeful message. And I want you to carry that away from here today as well, because without hope, we can all just throw up our hands and maybe we are gonna try and go to Mars. But there is a tremendous amount of hope, and we should be investing in that, not investing in these whimsies about running around on foreign planets, in my opinion.
So the question that I enjoyed that Philippe gave to me was from someone that's anonymous in here. As an aspiring journalist, how do you incorporate entertainment issues into entertainment reporting? Well, that is an interesting question. So for over a decade, I worked at MSNBC, Access Hollywood, E! News, and then Entertainment Tonight. And there is a reason I am not doing that full time anymore, and that is because it was really hard. It was really hard to get people to care about the issues that I cared about, mostly my bosses. So if I was gonna go and sit down with a Leonardo DiCaprio, they really wanted me to ask who he was dating. They honestly did not care about talking about his foundation, and I found that extremely frustrating. So moving forward, that's when Philippe and I started really looking at this as, okay, how can we kind of take this pop culture world and the save the world and meld them? And for both of us, we really think that finding engaging stories, finding stories that are fun, that have a little humor in them. I don't know who was more shocked, by the way, about that shark tag, if it was me or the shark. I honestly don't know, still to this day. I still can't believe that I did that, but it was so, I was even a little reluctant to put that in the show because I was a little nervous because I giggled too much, but I wanted people to see that there was a real moment there, and it was a true citizen science moment. And for us, it's all about taking people on the adventure with us, because people are only gonna save what they care about. And if people aren't gonna sit down and watch a 2-hour documentary about overfishing or about shark finning, I understand we need to figure out a way to show them another type of media, another type of entertainment that will get them into this conversation. So for us, it's how do we grow more people in this room? How do we grow more people caring about these issues? And I honestly see it as, let's use pop culture to our advantage. Let's use the Travel Channel. Let's use the Discovery Channel to our advantage and have more people talking about these issues.
Yeah. And then no matter what we do, it needs to have a message.
Yeah.
And technology, there's a question up here about virtual reality. Yes, to answer your question, we are inking a deal right now with a virtual reality company on developing some documentary expeditions utilizing VR technology to really put people in situ in a way that traditional screens cannot do.
Again, bring them along on the adventure.
And then, Bea, I'll let you, what's the most incredible thing you've seen in the ocean? Good one. We've got 2.5 minutes left.
Okay, for my 30th birthday, we were just started dating, and he asked what I wanted, and I said I want to go diving with great white sharks. He almost fell off his chair. And I think that's when you realize that possibly this was going to work.
Yeah, it's a good match.
And I will say that as we were in the cage down, 33 feet, there was a huge, was she a 17-footer?
Yeah, 17-foot.
A female 17-footer who it looked like she was pregnant, and she came by the cage. And sharks, the great whites, they have pupils. And when she came by, she took her pupil and she just scanned like my body up and down. And it just was the most amazing thing that's ever happened to me in the ocean.
I would say that, yeah, I mean, Ashlan already talked about the great whites, so I won't reiterate that, though it was spectacular. The craziest, one of the coolest things I've ever seen was diving with a Humboldt squid, 6-7-foot squid in the Gulf of California in the Sea of Cortez in the middle of the night, filming for a BBC doc series I did called Oceans. And you have to go down to about 100 feet, pitch black, diving, and there are thousands of them that come up at night. The largest daily migration in the world is from the twilight zone of the ocean up to the surface of the ocean, and these all over the ocean. And these squid are an example of that. And they have, their beaks are about as big as your fist. They're about as big as me, and they have hooks on their tentacles, and they pulse this red glowing color up and down their body. So they don't change. All they do is this red color, and so you have this. There's tens of thousands of them. So all of a sudden you're down, it's pitch black, and then all of a sudden this red color is rising towards you, and it just looks like you're descending into hell. I mean, it was like crazy.
I haven't done that for an obvious reason.
All of a sudden they're all over you because they're very curious. They tend to be cannibalistic too, which is nice. And when
Again?
one of them get in a fight with the other and gets injured, then like 5 of them will attack and tear it apart and eat it right in front of you. You're like, oh my God. And then they'll come right up at you, and their beak is right in your face, and they're like touching you, and they're like really curious, and then they'll fly off, and then another one will come up. So we got great footage. It was a great piece, but that was pretty freaky. And then we've got 21 seconds, but I'm going to take an extra minute to show this. Actually, one extra question I can answer with one word was, what other government entity other than fisheries and things like that is having a problem with conservation? One word: Congress, folks. Congress, okay? Half of Congress doesn't believe in climate change. A lot of Congress thinks that conservation and they're in the pocket of fisheries and things. Like, we
Half
need...
of them don't have a passport.
Yeah, half of Congress doesn't have a passport. Like, Congress is the biggest roadblock to progress.
So
Check out, if you want to watch Nuclear Sharks, 4:15. We're headed down there now. It's a great piece. I know you'll enjoy it. And then my children's book, Follow the Manoa, I'm signing those at 5:15 in the exhibition hall.
thanks, you
Thank
guys,
you.
for coming.